Research by Living Wage South Africa Network has found out most workers prefer a more decent living wage compared to what is offered. Most workers prefer between 12,000 to 15,000 a month to cover basic necessities of life. Professor Ines Meyer is the program lead at Living Wage South Africa Network at the University of Cape Town, and she joins us now to expand on their research. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this afternoon. What is this concept of a living wage, and how far back can we trace it in South Africa?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. So the living wage is an international concept, and the idea behind it is that we work for pay in order to have a sustainable life. But often, and especially in the South African context, people get paid for work, but it's actually not enough for them to have a decent life. It doesn't help to get people out of poverty. So the living wage would be the amount that a person would need to get paid in order to be able to live a decent life. And this concept goes back quite far, actually, to the early 20th century, but it got lost a bit from the 1950s onwards, and it has gained traction again since 2010s, and the Sustainable Development Goals in Goal 8, creation of decent work and sustainable livelihood, speak about appropriate wages, fair wages, without referring to the term living wage, but fair wages similar to living wages.
Okay. In terms of your research, were you looking at particular industries?
No, we actually conducted a national study, and this is now research that we conducted through the University of Cape Town, but it is information that we disseminate through the Living Wage South Africa Network, which is a not-profit organization. So in this research, we contacted people across the 9 provinces. We had about 1,600 people, and we didn't ask them actually what income would you prefer, but we just asked what is your quality of life like? How much choice do you have over aspects of life that matter to you? And we then asked, what is your income? Without linking the two. But we were able then to link in the analyses that the income and the quality of life, and we found that choice or a good positive quality of life became possible on average between 12 and 15,000 rand net per month.
So what is it that people are getting paid currently that does not afford them this decent life?
So legislation-wise, we have the national minimum wage if there are no sectoral wage agreements, which is currently roughly at 4,100 rand per month for a person working full-time. But if you consider that having work often goes with a substantial amount of cost, like extra transport costs, possibly extra cost for childcare or for care of the elderly, maybe expenses for clothing, extra clothing that one hasn't had. Paying such low wages actually means that the money often doesn't last until the end of the month. And at times people are getting poorer when they start working, because of the extra expenses. And so legally, the amount is much lower. Many people get paid much less, but from about that amount of 12 to 16,000, it should be possible. On average, if one budgets carefully to live a life that allows some choice over, for example, the kind of neighborhood one wants to live in, the kind of social relationships one would like, or housing, education, and so forth.
12 to 15,000 rand net or gross?
Net.
That barely allows you to choose a neighborhood, barely allows you to choose a social setting. How old were the people that you spoke to?
Quite right. So we looked at individuals at a working age between the ages of 18 and 65.
Okay. So South Africa has often been accused, and perhaps you'll guide us here, because we hear that also bandied about sometimes, that it has sustained apartheid-era salaries or wages. One, is that a fact? Two, why?
That is a tricky question. So I would like to answer it a bit differently and kind of avoid the exact question that you've asked. But I think worldwide, we started looking at how much should we pay for different occupations in the early parts of the last century. And we looked at how much is this job worth to us, and how do we actually determine the worth? And we're still continuing to use those systems that say this job is double the worth than another job, and then we allocate income to that, and we assume that that is a fair way of determining pay for work. But what we have lost track of is to say, well, what does that actually mean for the people who do the labor? If we just say, well, this job should be getting paid twice as much as another job, but if at that other job the income is so low that the people can barely survive, there's something fundamentally wrong. But we're just perpetuating a system, and as I said, that's worldwide, not just in South Africa, which was developed at a time where work and life looked very differently to what it looks like now.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Ines Meyer, Program Lead at the Living Wage South Africa Network at the University of Cape Town.